Hey people, it is Sunday, June the 2nd. It's about 4:57 in the afternoon and 18 degrees with a slight humidex. I'm on Dundas Street East, heading east, approaching Sherbourne up ahead, but I'm gonna keep on heading east and make my way into the Regent Park neighborhood. And we'll take a look at what's left of the remaining old original buildings of the housing project, which are currently being demolished. This is the last section of Regent Park that is left standing after most of it has been redeveloped over the last 10 to 15 years. And in another couple of years, all the old remaining buildings in the neighborhood will be completely gone and replaced by new housing. And demolition is well underway, so I thought we'd go and take a walk around, checking out what's left of the old Regent Park.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Just making a little video. Yeah. Oh no, sorry. No, sorry. No. And this is Dundas and Sherbourne, being its usual interesting self. And Regent Park also had quite the... Yeah. No. I don't know, she's asking me some unusual questions. Regent Park itself had quite the reputation for many years also. And it has mostly been cleaned up with all the new redevelopment of the neighborhood. Maybe I'll take us through one of the neighborhood alleyways on the way there. Turning onto Seton Street. A lot of these side streets are actually very charming. All right, let's take Callahan Lane. So this will take us straight through to Parliament Street. And oftentimes you'll encounter some interesting characters here in the alleyways. And you can see some cranes over there. They're currently erecting some of the new buildings in Regent Park. It's over close to where the demolition is underway of the older buildings. Matter of fact, some older buildings were recently demolished on that very site where those new buildings are now rising. Heads Lane. I wonder if that payphone actually works. It looks to be in working order. And here we are, Parliament and Dundas right over there. And across the street is where Regent Park begins as a neighborhood. Let's go to Oak Street. That's where we'll get the best look at the demolition. You can see this part of the neighborhood has all been redeveloped. And this will be a high-rise. Most of the newer buildings in the neighborhood that have been built in recent years have been leaning towards high-rise. And in a funny turn of events, the street we're currently on, Oak Street, was the subject of a National Film Board documentary back when Regent Park was first being constructed as a new neighborhood. This area was once lined with old Victorian housing, similar to what you see in Cabbagetown. This was actually part of Cabbagetown. And the housing became dilapidated and was pretty much labeled as a slum, so they decided to redevelop the area and demolished all the old Victorian row houses and developed Regent Park. And that documentary was called Farewell to Oak Street. And now here we are on Oak Street, and that very development that was the subject of that documentary is being demolished now to make way for even newer housing. So it's like farewell to Regent Park. As we once knew it, anyway. You can see how they're taking their time demolishing the building. It's like they're gutting it and then going to bring it down. Of course, this being a Sunday, there's no work currently underway. And that one is a bit further along in its demolition. And you can see the new buildings under construction. I guess I can get a closer look over here. The oldest parts of Regent Park date from the late 1940s. I'm not sure if these buildings are quite that old, but they're most likely at least from the 1950s. Decades and decades of families. And I think all the families that are displaced while this latest phase is underway get relocated to housing elsewhere in the city, public housing, and once the new buildings are complete here, in several years' time at least, a lot of those families will be able to come back and live in one of the new buildings, and oftentimes paying the same rent that they were paying before. I think that's how it works. I think the tallest buildings in Regent Park dated from the 1960s, and they were about 14 stories. Those ones were demolished close to 10 years ago in one of the earlier phases. Those are over on Dundas Street. But most of the neighborhood consisted of these mid-rise buildings and low-rise apartments and some townhouses. I guess all these satellite dishes aren't worth worth saving. I wonder if they'll just be brought down with the rest of the building. You can see a cluster of the newer buildings over there. And this phase in its redevelopment will consist of some even taller buildings, I think. Some of the tallest ones that will be in the neighborhood. It'll be quite a dense cluster of high-rises all along this entire stretch here. And you can see the CN Tower making itself known. Now, some of these buildings are still partially occupied. Seems that some units look boarded up and empty, but then another unit next door might still look occupied. I think this one might still have some people living in it. That one seems to be completely vacant. And there's Gerard Street over there. And Cabbagetown is across Gerard to the north. As I mentioned though, this was all Cabbagetown at one time. Alright, well here we go. Here's a demolition notice. Start of phases 4 and 5. You can see a map of what to expect. So these ones still seem occupied to me. Yeah, this building definitely still has some life to it. It's hard to tell with this one. I don't see much activity. It kind of has a mostly vacant look to it. I still see some curtains and windows though. This one likewise mostly seems to be empty, many boarded up windows, at least boarded up partially. I think that's just where the air conditioners would once go. But this one I think is still occupied. There are plenty of cars in the parking lot here. But no doubt these people know that very soon they'll be leaving and being relocated elsewhere. And you can bet that in some cases some of the families have lived in these buildings for decades. That one actually looks quite nice with all the ivy. So this end of the neighborhood has not yet been vacated. can hear a hawk. I just want to get a closer look at this one. It's all part of the same building, actually. I might have to come back at a later time and do another video when this section is being demolished. And as I touched on earlier, this was a notorious part of the city for quite a long time. I'd say mainly in the 1980s and 90s. It had a terrible reputation for crime and gang activity, and lots of gun crime, homicides, that sort of thing. And that still continues every now and again. Just has died down quite a bit though. I think the last major incident was maybe a few months ago, I can remember. Random garbage on the ground I'm kicking. So these are all occupied. But despite its past and even ongoing issues, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of families have lived in these buildings for decades, and a lot of them quite happily. As long as they didn't associate with the bad element, I'm sure they could just do their own thing and live their life just like anyone else, and that's unusual. Just in time for Pride. And some of these units look vacant. I guess it's sort of like a building by building case here. or even unit by unit. And those buildings are not officially considered part of Regent Park, but they're usually lumped in with the rest of the neighborhood. And they have a lot of problems from what I've been hearing. Not the best places to live. And this one seems to be largely vacant, but with the occasional occupied unit. And as I mentioned in a previous video, oftentimes where you see a Sam's food store, you might find yourself in a neighborhood that doesn't have the best reputation. That just seems to be the pattern. So we have all the new housing on one side of the street and the old on the other side. Kind of funny how the sidewalk wraps around the fire hydrant. And some vacant, some occupied. And I think I covered most of the remaining old section of Regent Park. And we're heading south into the new part of the neighborhood. And some of these new buildings are not even finished yet. Lots of new phases are still popping up here and there around the area. So I'm going to start to wrap up the walk as we got a look at demolition underway here in the last old section of Regent Park. It's the end of Regent Park as we once knew it anyway. So leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on this redevelopment. Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Or a little of both maybe. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And also be sure to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my videos. If you'd like to support the channel, there are links in the description where you can do so via PayPal, as well as via my merch store. Or you can also support the channel by becoming a channel member, or by sending a super thanks if you prefer. And you can find me on Instagram under KContinuum. So thanks for watching, and thanks to all the channel members. And be sure to keep checking back, because as always, I will continue.